Hello, my name is Charlene Garcia Sims, and I'm the Genealogy and Special Collections Librarian here at Rawlings. And we started a series in June to bring in authors and talk to them about their books. And so today we are very lucky to have Angel Vigil, a very prominent storyteller from Denver. And I'm going to read his bio because I am very impressed. Angel Vigil is retired chairman of the Fine and Performing Arts Department and director of drama at Colorado Academy in Denver. He is an award-winning author, performer, stage director, and teacher. His awards include the Heritage Artist Award and the Master Artist Award from the Colorado Council on the Arts. He has also received the Governor's Award for Excellence in Education and the Mayor's Individual Artist Fellowship Award. He also was awarded the Colorado State Theater Educator of the Year Award. Angel is the author of 6 award-winning books on Hispanic and Western culture and arts. His book, The Corn Mother and Other Stories and Legends from the Hispanic Southwest, won the prestigious New York Public Library Book for the Teen National Award. His book, Una Linda Raza, Cultural and Artistic Traditions of the Hispanic Southwest, won the Border Library Association Southwest Book of the Year Award and the Colorado Book of the Year Special Recognition Award. And this is, The Corn Woman, and this is Una Linda Raza. Angel is a Colorado heritage artist storyteller who has performed throughout the nation at festivals, universities, schools, and art centers. He has been featured storyteller at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee, Keepers of the Word Festival at Amherst College, the Rocky Mountain Storytelling Festival, the International Reading Association, the National Independent School Library Association, the Four Corners Storytelling Festival, the Mesa Storytelling Festival, and the Nebraska Storytelling Festival. His specialty is the oral tradition of the Hispanic Southwest. Angel is also a member of the Colorado Endowment for the Humanities Chautauqua program for his historical presentations. Angel has created 5 historical characters: El Vaquero, America's First Cowboy; El Conquistador, the Explorer of the New Worlds; Tezcatlipoca, the Supreme God of the Aztec Emperors; Manuel de Aliza, Northwest Trapper and Explorer; and Mariano Medina, Colorado Pioneer. So, Angel.
Yes, how are you doing?
It's so wonderful to have you here. The last time you were here,
I'm very happy.
The last time you were here, you came as Mariano Medina. Do you remember that?
I did do that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was last October. So I'm really glad that you're here today. And today we're going to discuss your first book, Corn Mothers, Stories and Legends of the Hispanic Southwest, which was published in 1994. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Do you remember that?
The truth is, I do remember that. That was my first book, and it won a lot of really big, important awards. And because of that, it opened the door for me to continue writing, and I've been able to write 6 books so far.
I know.
So you always are happy when your first book is a success.
Congratulations. So I'd like to ask you some questions about you and your performances and,
Sure.
and your publishing career. And so my first question is, what came first for you, performing or writing?
Performing came for me. I started out really as a dancer. I had a very long career as a dancer, ballet, modern jazz, folklorico, tap. I was one of those dancers. You needed someone to dance that way? I can dance that way. Why don't you hire me? So I actually had a very large base of dance styles that I could do. Toured all over the United States. I had a big solo tour sponsored by Mobil Oil and Denver Center Theater Company one year. Danced with the Hartford Ballet. Danced with a lot of pickup companies in New York City. I was a dance master for the National Chicano Dance Theater here in Denver. Started out as a dancer. Always worked in theater as a playwright, writing plays, and then of course as an actor. One of my plays was a school tour one year for the Denver Center Theater Company here in Denver. So I was always busy in the world of performance. And then what happened was I started, it's odd when you're a freelance artist, you basically say yes to every job, no matter what it is. The answer is yes, I can do that. So I started being invited to tell stories from around the world, be it a folklore storyteller. And then I developed my own niche little pocket, which has proven to be a decades-long successful career for me. Being a cuentista, a storyteller, the traditional stories of Mexico and the Hispanic Southwest. So then I'd written a play for the Denver Center Theater Company con Safos, and they were touring it around. And then I started being asked to present workshops at different reading associations. And so I was given those workshops, and one of the workshops, and what the workshop was about was how to get kids to write, what it was about, using traditional storytellers as the prompt for narrative writing, creative writing. So then, of course, I used stories from the Hispanic tradition as the examples. And then at one of the workshops, I remember so clearly, there were 2 acquisitions editors from 2 different publishing companies. And when I was done with my workshop, they kind of corralled me like this, one on one side, one on the other side, gave me their card, gave me their spiel. And I had a handout because it was for teachers, and teachers love handouts. So I did a handout of what I'm doing. And they both said, this handout, we're going to use this handout as your application to write a book for us. All you need to do is expand on this handout, turn it into a book, and we'll publish your book, because they were looking for, at that time, Hispanic authors. So looked at one, looked at the other, decided to go with one of them. And as they say, the rest is history. All of a sudden, I'm writing books and I'm an author. And that's a long roundabout story, how I almost just stumbled into it. But now it's one of my main profiles. I've written 6 books. They've all been really successful, prize winners. Now I'm asked to go around as the author to give talks based upon my work. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So what inspired you to write Corn Woman? And then tell us about the book itself. But I want to know what inspired you to write it.
You know what inspired me to write it? I was giving these workshops, telling these stories and everything. And I have these moments that are very clear in my memory. And I think that's one of the things that makes anybody a good writer. You have very specific moments that resonate with you, not like a diary, this happened and that happened, but you remember the emotion attached to that moment. And the emotions of characters are the most engaging part of any story that you're going to write or you're going to tell. So I'm doing one of these workshops, and again, some teachers come up. People always come up and talk to me after the workshops. So I'm talking to them, and this woman comes up and says, "Oh, Señor Vigil, it's very good you're telling these stories." And I remember her sentence so clearly. She says, "It's too bad there's no books about this written by Hispanic people." And then I said, how can that possibly be? We're a whole culture. We're a whole people. We have a rich history. We help make this country what it is. How can you as a teacher not find any books about us? And she says, no, there's really not many books about you, especially books written by Hispanos. So I'm going, oh, that just can't be. So sure enough, I go down to Tattoo Cover, the bookstore here in Denver, and I look deliberately. I go through all the cookbooks, cookbooks from Mexico, cookbooks from here. There'll be all do all the travel books, do all the history books, look at all the collections of folk tales. There were some of them, not a lot, every single one of them written by an Anglo person. And I remember, when I was talking, I've used this as a line for students when I'm talking to them. I say what it made me feel is, are we as a people too dumb, too lazy, too ignorant to write stories about ourselves, to write our own stories? And I said, well, the answer to those 3 questions, of course we're not. So I took it upon myself. I'm going to prove that lady. Next time she comes up to me, I'll be able to go, well, how about this book right here that I wrote? So so that was the start of it. It was an impetus for me to say, well, gosh, if someone's going to write those books, I guess I might as well step up and be active and proactive and be an author that writes these books. Of course, the grandfather of Chicano literature is Rodolfo Anaya. And later on, we crossed paths several times, and he was very supportive of Chicano authors coming up. So he wrote a foreword to one of my books. As a joke, I told my publisher, I said, instead of putting my name in big letters and his name in small letters, you should put his name in big letters, forward by Rodolfo Anaya, and then my name in small letters underneath. And I said, we'd probably sell more books that way. So that's how the Corn Woman happened. And then I wrote it. I doubled down really hard one summer, wrote 45 stories of him, 45 stories in the book. And it won a very large national award from the New York City Public Library. And I didn't know what a big highfalutin award it was until later I was looking at another author's book. And on the back they have the author's page, and he had listed as one of his prize accomplishments was winning this award that I won. And I was going, oh my gosh, that award I won was a really big deal. So it made me feel a lot better. And then my publishers, now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, you got to write more books. That book's really taken off, Angel. You got to write more books. So that's what happened.
Thank you. How long did you spend researching Corn Mother? I know you have some really wonderful stories. Some of the people that you interviewed for it.
Boy, that's one of the richest experiences of my whole life. In fact, I was fortunate to get some grants actually to go do research. There's 3 types of research you got to do if you're going to be a scholar. And I like to view myself as a literary scholar. I've done the hard work. One, you got to go to primary sources. So what happened then was primary sources are the first recording, the first diary, the first journal, the first book written about this. So I went back, and these were books collected in 1910, 1920 by a man named Juan B. Real, and he collected over 800 traditional narratives from southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And then another man, I think his name Arthur Espinosa, he collected some more after him. So those were considered the primary sources, the first field collections of stories in a very old world Spanish. And then, of course, they had those English synopsis on the side of it. And I tried to read the Spanish, but I don't know, some of the words I wasn't that familiar with as Spanish from 1910, an older version of Spanish. So I did all that primary source material, went to libraries, did all that, really liked that a little bit. The other thing I did is I got in my car, drove hundreds and hundreds of miles through southern Colorado and northern New Mexico, knocking on, knock, people's doors. And a woman named Dana Everett down in the San Luis Valley had done some work down there before collecting folklore. And she had paved the way for me and introduced me to a lot of elderly people. And then so there I myself did the other part of scholar research, primary sources. The second part, of course, is doing your own field recordings. So I went to all these houses, did all these field recordings. Every single one of those people has passed on now, because at the time I recorded them, they were older than I am right now. So they've all passed on by now. So I was one of the very last people to record them in their house. And I would ask them, can you tell me about your life? Can you tell me some stories? You remember when you were a child and everything. So that was really rich. I kind of figured out a strategy. If I showed up around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, bumped up against dinner time. I started doing it on purpose, actually. Bumped up against dinner time, and the hospitality was so warm. I was always invited to dinner. And so I'm eating a grandma's home-cooked meal all of a sudden, right? Just enjoyed those meals so much, enjoyed the hospitality so much. And then the third thing I did, and this was the thing that was astounding to me, started telling my mom these stories. She boo-hoo-hoo, she gets all crybaby, I was crying and everything. Get in the car, we got to go see your Aunt Vanjie. So we get in the car, we go see my Aunt Vanjie. She says, tell her the story. So I told her a story about a little boy, a grandpa takes his grandson to the lake on the farm and grabs a snake and holds it up. The snake talks, and the grandpa understood the language of the snakes. It's an old story, of course. But then they both start crying and they both start talking in Spanish. And the only time they talk in Spanish is, of course, when they're either really happy or someone's died. Just a traumatic, emotional moment. So now I've made my mom cry. I've made my aunt cry, and I asked them, how come you're crying? And then they both told me, well, it's because of this. Now that you're older yourself and you have your man's voice, when we listen to that story you're telling, if we close our eyes, we can hear the voice of our own grandfather and uncle telling us those stories in the farm outside of French, New Mexico, outside of Springer. And then that's when I realized I didn't have to do those primary sources. I didn't have to do all those field recordings. Both of those are good things to do if I want to be a scholar. But all I had to do was go talk to my own older relatives, including my mom, and they were primary source material that I had overlooked about what it was like to grow up in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. So that's how I collected all the information for those first 2 books of mine, 90 different stories.
That is such a wonderful story. And I really relate to what you're saying because as a genealogist, when I go from relative to relative, I kind of learned to go at 3:30 also so that I could.
Always show up before dinner. It's the only way to show up. You'll be
But you know,
happy.
this is a cultural thing, and I know it's a cultural thing in the Hispanic culture because you can't just go in there and do business. You can't
No,
say,
no,
okay,
no, no.
I'm here to ask you questions. You have to talk about all their family. You have
Absolutely.
to, eat. You have to do a lot of things before you can get to business. And sometimes you don't even get to business that day. You leave and then you come back.
I'm making it real fast because we're doing a short thing here, but it would take 3-4 hours, and the first hour and a half was just talking about the weather, talking about kids, talking about this and that. Maybe eat some dinner, maybe bring out the little tape recorder, talk a little bit about what I was looking for. And then sometimes I didn't even get around to business because it got too late and they were going to go to bed. And then I asked if I could come back later. Sometimes they said yes, sometimes they said no. But you couldn't just barge in task oriented because it'd be insulting actually and disrespectful.
I know, and this is what I love about doing research.
Yeah.
And doesn't it just warm your heart how many of these people you talk to and you remember, and especially now that they're gone.
I remember their houses, and you remember this. They had those little oval tin pictures of their relatives. They're always oval and they're always tin. They always had a picture of Jesus. And then a lot of the houses had a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president of their time when they were growing up as adults. And then some of them might have had picture of the Pope, That's what would be on the walls.
Most of my relatives had a picture of Kennedy, John Kennedy.
Kennedy, yeah.
You're right. That was awesome. Well, we could go on talking forever. I always like to ask authors this question. What was your favorite book as a child?
Oh, when I was a child, it's going to be surprising as the first Mr. Chicano here. I write Chicano books and Mr. Hispano author and everything. But I remember these books so well. My mom now I look at it as a family tradition and I'm thankful for. She was a big reader. She always had a stack of fiction novels that she was reading by her bedstand. And then every single week, she'd take me and my sister Teresa to the library. So early on, we were imprinted with this idea of libraries and reading books. And we'd be over there in the little kids section getting our books and everything, And then we'd read them. Next week, we'd go back, get some more books. So they were tiny. I remember them. Maybe they were big in my little kids' hands, but they were about this size, very tiny. And I remember they all had a green cover. And they were the collection of the Peter Rabbit stories and all the pictures of Peter Rabbit and all the adventures Peter Rabbit had and everything, And I just loved those books. And, there's a lot of them too in the series. So every week I'd go get one or two more and then I'd read them all that the library had. And then I'd check them out again and read them again and everything. And they were all illustrated, they had those kind of, I don't know, now they're kind of childlike, but the real kind of childlike illustrations of England country farm life with Peter Rabbit and the animals and everything. So those are my favorite books as a child. I remember those so well. Happy I started
Joel,
out that way.
and they're very Chicano. No, I just
were written by an English lady, the Peter Rabbit stories.
Yeah, no, I think that's really funny. But what is your favorite story in Corn Woman?
You know what? That's almost like asking a parent who's your favorite kid. Then they say, "Oh, they're all my favorite. I love them all equally." What has happened over time is, of course, I have ones that I resonate a little bit more with, and then the one that I have 3 stories that have kind of become my signature stories. And I always try, if it ever happens again, that I'm at an event where I'm just straight up telling stories. I'm not one of my historical characters or something. I always close with these stories in a sequence because they're all connected together. One of them is Pedro de Oro de Malas, and it's a trickster story. And Pedro de Oro de Malas, he's the most famous of the Hispanic tricksters. He's so famous, Cervantes, and we're not talking any Cervantes, we're talking Don Quixote Cervantes. He actually wrote a play about Pedro de Oro de Malas. So that shows you how far back in Spanish, in Latino culture, this character actually goes. So then what we have is Pedro de Ornamalas. Then I do another story, Mucho Macho Muchacho, which is a personal story about a little boy and a grandpa. The little boy's always me. My grandpa's always my grandpa on the farm, you know. And then the other story is, I guess you could say, is my favorite story from the Corn Woman, is because it's called Dona Sebastiana. And it's a very powerful religious story. And I always tell it. And if I don't tell it, people say, oh, how come you didn't do Dona Sebastiana? Hey, I told another story. I just didn't get around to it this time. Well, you better tell it next time. So now I make a point to tell it every time.
Thank you, Dona Sebastiana. I remember her because we used to they let us go to church services Good Friday, and the penitentes would be hauling Dona Sebastiana. And it was really scary because she was a deaf. In fact, it's right here. It's pretty scary.
It's the same picture I'm showing.
So you're showing it too. Okay. So she was pretty scary. She was pretty scary. And I think you and I were talking about it's a miracle we don't have all kinds of problems. So my favorite is Apolonio Neveres Jackson's by Abelardo Delgado. Will you please read it for us? But before you do, tell us a little bit about Abelardo. And we're okay on time, so
okay, good.
Don't worry about that.
About of course, we all call him Lalo. There's all these characters, and I call them characters because the personalities were so large and so wonderful, and they were impactful on community life. And Lalo was one of those characters. He's a big, robust man, had a big barrel chest, and he had a huge voice. Like his natural voice when he was reciting his own poetry was like he had a megaphone, but it was just his voice would fill up the whole room. It was powerful. So anyone that ever heard him telling a story will remember his voice and the way he would tell the story. So then what happened is Lalo, I did a lot of shows with him. I guess we call them shows at the event. He was doing poetry. I was telling stories. So we were at a lot of events together for any number of reasons, you know. And so I got to know him quite well. And when I was doing my books, I asked him, could you contribute a couple of your original stories to my book? And he said, of course he would. And then he actually contributed one of his poems to the Linda Raza book. And then he was just a wonderful, very warm and generous person. And then when he died, I went to his funeral at the Lady of Guadalupe Church here in Denver. And as they were putting his casket into the hearse to go away, the priest was there, and I always remember his final words. As the casket's going in, he yells out, "Goodbye, Lalo!" And then we all yelled out, "Goodbye, Lalo!" And then Lalo just went away, but he's still here. He's still here in our hearts. And I'm glad in my life I was able to know a person like Lalo. He's not only kind to me, but he's very important to the Chicano community here in the state of Colorado.
Okay, so we're in for a brick treat. You're going to read to us Apolonio Neveres Jackson.
Okay, here we go. I got my book out, okay? And I'm actually going to read it. I'm not very used to reading from my own books. And the reason is usually if it's a story in my book, I just tell the story like a storyteller. But since this is not my own story, it's written by Lalo Delgado, person I just told you about. So now I'm going to read the story to you. So my eyes are going to be leaving the camera a little bit, coming down to the book, coming up a little bit. But I want to capture his story as he wrote it, verbatim, word for word. Apolonio Neveres Jackson is the name of it. And let me give you a little background to this. Lalo, he was funny. I mean, the thing about Lalo, in addition to everything else, he was funny. He just had a quirky sense of humor. So he writes this story that I'm going to read you, and it's about Albert Einstein. E equals MC squared, considered the greatest physics genius in the history of mankind, you know. So whenever they talk about your genius, they say, oh, you think you're an Einstein, I guess, you know. So he's become a generic name, Einstein, for a genius. So he concocted this story about how Einstein came up with his formula E equals MC squared. And one of Einstein's propositions, of course, was that matter can change shape, but there'll never be more matter. There's always a constant amount of matter in the universe, and that's how he built his his scientific formulas around that proposition. And then Lala wrote this story. That's not the real story. This is the real story about how Einstein came up with his famous ideas. And the name of the story is Apollonio Nevarez Jackson. In the World Book of Encyclopedia, we find the following statement about Dr. Albert Einstein's work. His famous equation E equals mc squared became the foundation stone in the development of nuclear energy. Einstein developed his theory through deep philosophical thought and complex mathematical reasoning. In a recent visit to Garden City, Kansas, I found that not to be true. It wasn't Einstein, but an old half Chicano, half Navajo cook who made the greatest contribution to Dr. Einstein's theory. The place for that great contribution was Cholula, New Mexico. I was visiting Don Cosme Payagua. That's a great name. In the barrio of Las Nalgas, also a great name for a barrio, in Garden City. It was about noon, so Don Cosmo and his wife, Elvira, asked me to share a noon meal with them, which I accepted. A couple of their grandchildren came in, rolled a tortilla with sopa de fideo, grabbed 2 Pepsis from the refrigerator, and dashed back to the yard to continue their Star Wars battle. 2 dead tree trunks were their space ships. Don Cosme was no longer fit to work out in the sugar beet fields near Garden City, so the Migrant Head Start had hired him to go every Friday and tell stories to the children. He liked his new job very much. I'd gone to see him because I was evaluating the legal services in that area, and he and his wife had been recent clients. As we ate, he began to tell the story of Apollonio Nevarez Jackson and Dr. Einstein. I was glad I had accepted the invitation to lunch because the food was delicious and I was hungry. Don Cosme and I ate our sopa and caldo along with some freshly made tortillas de harina. He drank canela caliente. I had Diet Pepsi. He paused as if to arrange in his mind the tale that he was about to unload on me. He referred to Dr. Einstein as Don Alberto, as if they'd been old drinking buddies. I could just picture Dr. Einstein as a farm worker hoeing beets or surgical away from Don Cosme. Don Cosme began his tale by telling me he'd been born in Dixon, New Mexico. The famous German-Swiss-American mathematician, he went on to tell me in a matter-of-fact tone that Dr. Einstein, the famous German-Swiss-American mathematician and physicist, was rather fond of Mexican food. Dr. Einstein was especially fond of red chili from New Mexico. It was not uncommon for him to make special trips to small, out-of-the-way restaurants that specialize in chili colorado dishes. That's how I met Don Alberto, Don Cosme told me as he went on with the story in the same charming manner he used with the children on Fridays. The chamaquitos from the Head Start Center loved him. Don Cosme continued his story. It was un domingo, and I had stopped for coffee at Chloe's. Chloe, the owner, was a pleasantly plump woman. Her restaurant was in El Rito. Chloe's cafe consisted of 3 small tables with 2 chairs each. When I got there, 5 Americanos were already eating. One of them was the famous Don Alberto. I ordered coffee and 2 sopapillas. I'd been in a hurry to visit other families that day. I felt like cutting it off and excusing myself, but by now I was hooked. I wanted to know how the cuento of Don Alberto turned out. Don Cosme continued. Chloe knew Don Alberto. She made the introductions. We shook hands. I was surprised to hear him speak in Spanish. His Spanish was a bit mucho, but he was understandable. Don Cosme laughed as he got to this part. He displayed a good set of very fine teeth. It could be due to the fluoride in the water in the region where he had grown up in New Mexico. After learning that Don Alberto liked chili colorado, Don Cosme recommended the restaurant in Cholula. Apollonio Nevarez Jackson was the owner, cook, waiter, dishwasher, and bouncer. The latter was seldom needed, only when a borracho would come in and try to bother the customers. Apollonio would gently but forcibly throw him out. His restaurant had a big name for such a tiny place. It was known as La Rosa Abierta de Día y de Noche. The open rows of day and night consisted of a long counter with 4 stools. Apollonio had bought all this in the Army surplus store in Albuquerque. Some of the story is documented history. Everyone in Chile knows it. I think the story is preserved in vinegar. It stayed pretty much the same throughout the years. No one dares add or subtract anything from it. The 2 grandchildren ran in. Each one stopped to give Don Cosme a big kiss and a big hug. They ran out shouting, "The force be with you, Grandpa." Hearing them, I thought how easy it was for Chicano children to jump in and out of their 2 cultures. Don Cosme continued. It wasn't until the following year that Don Alberto got around to eating at La Rosa Abierta de Día y de Noche. I have that date carved in my memory. Upon saying this, Don Cosmo touched his forehead, grabado en la memoria. He paused. He was trying to arrange in his mind what part of the story to say next. He said softly, July 7. He did not give the year. That struck me as odd. I wanted to ask him for the year. He'd already started with his cuento on a new route. I dare not interrupt him or fall behind. Apollonio doubled as a curandero. He had some herbs in the back of the restaurant. He also had an adobe hut in the back. He lived there. Apollonio was one of the champion dicho sayers in the whole state of New Mexico. He liked to discuss philosophy and religion with his customers. He was very knowledgeable in these subjects. It looked like he'd spent the better part of his life in a seminary studying to become a Jesuit priest. His English was flawless, and so was his Spanish. Usually, of course, he spoke Navajo. He used to listen to the Navajo radio station while he prepared the orders. Some said he was a member of the Peyote Indian Church. Others said he was a devout Catholic who went to Mass every day. Yet many swore he was an atheist who believed in nothing. All of these were possible, but they were all rumors, of course. The truth is that he did spend many hours reading all kinds of books. He liked to drink tequila and read. He said the drink helped him to concentrate better. His true art was cooking. He liked to experiment with all kinds of food combinations. His specialty was chili colorado. He had a different chili dish every Sunday. Sometimes he went too far, like the time he put applesauce and raisins in his chili colorado. Don Cosme went on. The old problem with Don Alberto was having with his theories about time and matter was the dogma that matter cannot either be created or destroyed. In our way of thinking, it mainly meant that you add a pound of frijoles to a pound of rice, and you should end up with 2 pounds of food, right? I nodded, fully captured by his words. Wrong! Don Cosme cut me off. Let me go on with the story. Not all the credit should be given to Apollonio. Don Alberto was by then on the verge of arriving at the same idea. It was Apollonio who had the problem solved in the 2-burner gas stove on which he cooked. I continued to listen to the rest of the story, which Don Cosme unveiled at his own pace. The grandchildren interrupted once again. One had fallen off the spaceship and had scraped his elbow. The other was giggling about it. That made the other cry even louder. I had my 3rd cup of hot cinnamon tea sweetened with brown sugar. Don Cosme joined me with a cup of his own as he got ready to finish the cuento of Apollonio Nevarez Jackson. The punchline is the story is that Apollonio had prepared a tasty chili con carne dish with various spices. He had added equal portions of rice and beans. Apollonio had known for a long time that when you cook rice and beans together, the finished dish weighs more than you'd cooked the same amount of rice and beans separately. Apollonio knew this increase was known to millions of poor Mexicans who often had nothing but rice and beans to feed an entire family. It was as if God made the food rendir. The food did indeed grow to feed the entire family. Mixing beans and rice always produced something extra. More taste, more protein, and actually more food was produced by mixing them together. Mixing a pound of rice with a pound of beans always gave you 2 pounds with a few ounces extra. When Apollonio served Don Alberto a plate of his chili con carne and explained all of this to him, Don Alberto wanted to know why that had happened. Don Alberto had never thought this could happen. His white hair stood up more than usual. His thick eyebrows, like rows of sugar beets with weeds, raised almost to meet the hair on his head when he realized what Don Apollonio was saying negated the idea that matter cannot either be created or destroyed. Arroz and frijoles mixed together disproved the law that science had held up to that point. To add to Dr. Einstein's amazement, Apollonio added that any Indian and Mexican wife knew that. The story goes on to say that Don Alberto ran out of La Rosa Abierta de la Dia de la Noche as if death herself was chasing him. He went out like one of those rockets they were to invent much later. He did not even stop to pay for his chili con carne. All he had in his mind as he ran out was the miracle, the scientific miracle of frijoles con arroz. If Apollonio had only been able to look inside Dr. Einstein's mind, he would have seen a right side computer and a left side computer operating at full capacity. At that very moment, Dr. Einstein was formulating the theories that would become the foundation for experiments in atomic energy. It wasn't too long after this that the first atomic bomb was tested in Los Alamos, and others were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Apollonio is not credited with the mass killings and destruction. No atomic submarine has been named after him, nor have workers from nuclear electrical plants thanked him for his contribution. Apollonio, Alvarez, Jackson, Chicano, and Navajo will not be found in any pages of the World Book Encyclopedia. Today, it's even hard to find his ill-kept tomb in Chilili. Don Cosme tried once to have Anglo newspaper reporters write the story in local papers. One had actually written it, but the editor decided not to run it. I left Don Cosme's house. I thanked him and his wife for the meal, the hot canela, and the story. I asked Don Cosme if he would mind if I wrote the story just as he had told me. I wanted to share it with as many people as possible. He answered, "What are stories for, if not for sharing?" I agreed, and here it is. And that's the story Lalo contributed to my book, The Corn Woman.
Oh, I just love Lalo. He was so creative. I mean, his stories. There's so many stories that that were different. You know, they weren't all alike. That's what I loved about him and his poetry. And I remember he wrote a book. I can't remember how many poems to La Llorona. Was it 33 poems to La? Something like that.
You know, he improvised those poems. He'd make them up on the spot.
Like, I believe that.
If you're here right now in the talk with us, he'd make up a poem about this.
Yeah, he came here for Earth Day one year. Oh gosh, around 2003, and he improvised. He wrote a poem right about Earth Day right there. It was an original.
Many times.
Yeah, well, I love this story. And it brings science and physics together in such a fun in such a fun way. Like I said, which Abelardo used to do so often. So I want to thank you, Angel, for being with us today. And we have a wonderful surprise. You're coming back next Wednesday to talk about una Linda Raza, cultural and artistic traditions of the Southwest.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we're going to focus on is the chapter on murals, because murals have become so popular here in Pueblo. And there's so much to murals than just something on, the outside of public art. So we're looking forward to it. So thank you so much. And we love having you here.
Thank you for having me take part. Everyone down in Pueblo, I love coming down to Pueblo. If ever the library opens up again, we're all hoping for that, and I'm down there doing something, come on down and watch one of my shows. I'll be glad to share what I do with you. Thank you so much.
Well, I look forward to your new character, and I'll keep it a secret for now.
Okay.
All right. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please continue joining us for all our virtual programs. But mark your calendars for next Wednesday for another talk, book talk with Angel Vigil at 4:00.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Adios, amigos.